This was exactly what President Kennedy was getting set to reveal. Who is it that tasked you to do that? And he said, well, you people would consider it God, but it's very, very different than you think.
Wow.
Congressional Research Service do a major deep probe into finding out what information existed inside the possession of the United States government relating to UFOs and whatever extraterrestrial intelligence might be responsible for that.
So now imagine a civilization 1 million years ahead of us being able to quantum teleport themselves, right? Bilocate from one place to another.
They dug in and found out that they had decided they were going to disassemble the nuclear warheads. That's what got it killed.
Welcome back, family, for another episode of The Convergence. Today, this is a very interesting conversation. We're joined here with my co-host, Neil Gar. We're at the New Living Expo. And Neil, how's this weekend been? I know you've been through a lot. This is the last day of a 3-day event. And who are we going to be talking to today?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here with everybody. And this is the New Living Expo, newlivingexpo.com. And honestly, it's been a journey to get to this point. Hours and hours and hours, countless amount of time just to put this all together, and just being here with you guys and seeing the fruits of the labor is just amazing. The connection, the love, the inspiration that everybody is receiving, and then getting to see people that I've connected with online like yourself, and being here in person, like it's a whole different dimension of experience, And so today we're speaking to Billy Carson and Danny Sheehan, both amazing individuals that are experts in their own fields, and we're really getting into a conversation. You wanted to do this so that we can have people that have different perspectives or even similar narratives, but in a different way, because we all have our own dimensions of, the way we're coming at it, so that we can see where there are similarities in what we're creating, right? Bringing people together so we can have a discussion to continue this evolution.
Yes, beautiful. And I love to start with Danny. If we go back 1977, you were alone in a vault in the basement of the Library of Congress. Could you walk us into that room that day that you were there?
Sure. I had been asked to become a special counsel to the investigation that President Carter, who had just been elected in November of '76, that he had asked to have the Congressional Research Service do a major deep probe into finding out what information existed inside the possession of the United States government relating to UFOs and whatever extraterrestrial intelligence might be responsible for that. And I've been contacted at Jesuit headquarters. I was the chief counsel at the United States Jesuit headquarters in charge of their social ministry office, which is their public policy information. And I was contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith, who was the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Library of Congress's Congressional Research Service. And when she asked me to become special counsel to the investigation, and she said, what kind of information would you like to have to start with? And I said, well, I want to have the classified portions of Project Blue Book. I know that there was a whole bunch of public information about Project Blue Book, which was designed to explain away as many of the UFO sightings as they possibly could, and even those that weren't rationally tracked. But the bottom line is there were over 700 of them. I knew that it was totally impossible for them to come up with any conceivable explanation for them. And there was a special unit assigned to investigate those. So I said, I'd like to get that. And she said, well, they're never going to let us have that. That's all way classified. I said, well, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And so she did. And much to her surprise and my pleasant surprise, they said I could see them. And they brought them into Washington. And they brought them to the Madison building, which was the brand new wing of the Library of Congress that they had just built. Nobody was in it yet. It was brand new. And they asked me to come there on Saturday morning, the 2 photo IDs. So I went there Saturday morning. There are these 2 suits at the door, outdoors, big kind of no-neck, muscled up looking guys, special forces guys, kind of. And they looked at both of my IDs and they ushered me in. I walk down the hall. He said to go down the hall to the elevator and go down to the bottom floor. So I did, and I had my pinstripe suit on, my lawyer suit, briefcase, and the whole 8 yards. As I was going down in the elevator, it just struck me that I should probably take a yellow pad out of my briefcase, and I just put it under my arm, came down into the basement. The doors slid open. I stepped out into the hall, and I could see down the hall, about maybe 50 feet or so, I could see this door that was open. The light was on in this room, and these two other suits were standing there, right? So I go all the way down to the end, where the door was, and they said, okay, look, you got to leave your briefcase here. You can't take any notes. You can't do any recordings, anything. So I left my briefcase. I go into the room, and it was a room about maybe 20 feet wide, about 15 feet deep. And they had these 3 card tables, the high-tech stuff. There were these 3 card tables. They had these boxes, these like larger than shoe boxes, kind of this off greenish, light green. And they were filled with film canisters, and they were microfiche. And so they had a little microfiche machine there. And so I sit down and took off my jacket and sat down and started opening them up and putting the microfiche in. And it was hand cranked, tinny old microfiche machine. And I was going through this, and I said, I don't know how long they're going to give me here, but I'm trying to look for photographs. I figured that's how to get started. So that's what I did. Went through 2 or 3 of the canisters. They had tons of documents. I started reading through them, just seeing the official documents, and that they were all in Blue Book, Air Force documents, all top secret, those. And as I got in about the 3rd or 4th canister, there were some photographs, and it was a crash retrieval, set of photographs of a crash retrieval. Not any doubt about what it was. Full scale saucer, with the dome on top, about maybe 30 meters wide. It had hit into this snow-covered field and plowed this big trench in the field and stuck in the side of this embankment. And there were Air Force guys around it. I recognized it. Winter fur around the hoods that they had. And they were taking photographs of this, excitedly kind of all around this crap. And there was one fellow that had a camera, film camera, with these 2 canisters on top of it. So it's like, it must have been 50s or so, 50s, late 50s. So I cranked it through and saw a couple of photographs. I realized that along the bottom of the dome of this craft, there were these symbols right along the bottom of it, were hooked together with the disc. So I took the yellow pad out, and I opened it up to the cardboard section, and I slid it into the microfiche machine, and then I refocused the photograph so that it was right on the fit into the back and the cardboard inside. I traced them exact because I wanted to make sure they were completely accurate, because I thought someday, we may be able to get some means of deciphering these. I wanted to have the exact. So I traced all of them, the whole 180 degrees that I could see of the dome. I closed it up, and I said, I better get out of here. Because they're trying to,
What did I just see?
take these away from me. So I put the stuff back in the canister. I put all the stuff back in, got my jacket on, put the yellow pad up lengthwise under my arm, and walked out. Walked right straight out the door. So I walked right past these 2 suits, right? And I reached out and picked up my briefcase. I started walking down the hall, and one of the guys says, Sheehan, hold it. Sheehan, hold it. What is that you got there? And I said, oh, this is my briefcase. I just picked up my briefcase there. I said, no, under your arm. What's that? And they come over there, kind of menacing me. And one of the guys grabs the thing away. He rubbles through the yellow pages. There's nothing on the yellow pages. So he hands it back to me. So I end up going, here they give it back to me. I put it under my arm. I go all the way back to the elevator, as I'm going up in the elevator, I put it inside my briefcase. I go back to Jesuit headquarters, right? And I go to Father Bill Davis, who was my Jesuit superior. At the time, I was a candidate for the Jesuit priesthood at the time. And I show what I've got. And Father Davis bends down and slides open the drawer at his desk, and he takes out this 8.5 by 11 manila folder with this little bronze clip on it and hands it to me. So I unclip it and I slid out an 8.5 by 11 black and white photograph of a UFO in flight. And I look, I say to Bill, I said, Bill, where'd you get this? And he said, I got it from my sister Dodie. And I said, well, where did Dodie get it? And she got it from her husband, Michael, who's the chief air traffic controller at the Seattle airport in Washington State. I said, well, where did he get it? He said, well, his best friend gave it to him, who's a cargo pilot that flies cargo all around the Northwest. And he took the photograph right out of the window of his plane. And when it was back in those days, and he said they brought it to the drugstore to get it developed. Well, yeah, way back at that tech level, right? And when he sees what he's got, he said he didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want to report it. He was afraid he'd lose his pilot license. So what he did, he said, I'm going to bring it to my best friend, Michael, who's head of the air traffic controllers at Seattle airport. And then I'll have done that, and I'm not going to get in trouble. So he gives it to Mike. Well, Michael didn't want to get in trouble either.
The taboo around it, right? People didn't want the photograph.
They knew that their people would get after him and threaten them and everything. So what was Mike brings it home, gives it to his wife Dodie, and he said, "Here, take this and bring it to your brother. He's a priest." Oh, good. That's what he says. Okay, so that's how I got it. So that's what happened.
Just to connect the dots real quick, the symbols that you saw on the saucer, eventually they found that they were Sumerian symbols.
No. It was peculiar. We had those at Jesuit headquarters, and when we set up a thing called the Christic Institute, and that helped organize a thing called the Washington Interreligious Staff Council. There are 54 major religious denominations in the United States that have Washington, D.C. offices where they monitor legislative activity, etc. So we gathered them together and made a presentation, Father Davis and I, recommending that we set up a task force of all of these different denominations to come to grips with the UFO issue and the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization and what impact that was going to have on the religious traditions. Because I was convinced it would, and they were just kind of stunned, and didn't actually. Judy Stone, who was chairing the meeting from the National Council of Church, she just turned to them and said, "Is there anybody else that has any other ideas?" Things that they weren't even going to begin to talk about it. So at that stage, I left this stuff at Jesuit headquarters. But what happened is that when we moved offices to California, we had to store this information, and one of the big El Niños came and had this super rainstorm and flooded out this area, and they actually threw out some of our documents without even talking to us. Well, I didn't know until months later when we got to go through the documents and that these were gone. They had thrown out some of them, and we just concluded that must be what happened. That we didn't get a chance to actually go through. But what I should do someday is get some kind of do the holotropic breathing, get totally relaxed, and try to recall the exact sequence in which these existed. I know generally what they look like. I remember exactly what the different symbols were, but I don't remember the order that they were in. So that's what I'm really going to have to do, because I believe that this entire issue of the UFOs and this civilization that they come from, is at an extraordinarily high level of consciousness. That this is, as Teilhard de Chardin talks about, that in Jesuit priest who's a paleontologist and discovered Peking man, he wrote letters to his sister, and she put them into books after he passed away because he was banned by the Vatican from writing about this or teaching publicly that he thought that Jesus Christ and the Buddha and Lao Tzu and some of these others were like biological mutations of what the human family was evolving toward, that we were evolving this faculty of discernment, like seeing or hearing, that was a new faculty that primarily relate to the pituitary. That this chakra center in the human body was able to engage in an act of direct physiological discernment, like sight or hearing, and could actually directly engage the unitive phenomena that bonds every single ultimately irreducible integer matter of the entire universe into one unified harmonic whole. And that by dint of this experience, like seeing or hearing, one could discern what conduct, human conduct, either individual or collective, was either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of the universe. And this is what we began to discuss at Jesuit headquarters.
Wow.
I'm trying to update the Jesuit order.
Right,
Was
right.
created back in 1547 to reform the Catholic Church, to get it up into the modern age. At that point, to try to forestall the Protestant Reformation.
Wow.
But they hadn't succeeded in doing this yet. So I was quite excited at Jesuit headquarters of being able to play some significant role in this. Contacted the Vatican archives and ended up eventually, talking with Johann X, who's the head of the archives, to see if we could get a hold of some of the additional information. They were not prepared at that time to do it. So I'm going to have to go back and get a meeting with Leo.
Probably ready now.
Johann, to set up a meeting so that we can say, come on, Leo, let's get with it.
Right. Are you saying that so you showed them basically the paper that had the symbols on it, right? That you had outlined. And then are you saying they shelved it and then it was flooded and basically they lost it? But so when they looked at it, they did not really do anything with it in order to update the Vatican or even look at this as maybe this is some ET awareness. So, and then can you just briefly speak about what the connection was with the 54 other religious organizations? Was it presented to like a council of different religious organizations to also address and see what it could be?
We actually, what we did is we just, the Jesuits asked to convene a meeting of all of them, and just made the presentation of asking them to put together a task force so that we could all come to grips with this. And like, they just were not even going to respond at all. Like there was no response. So we realized that they were concerned about the Jesuits and the Catholic Church to begin with, because it had taken them a whole Reformation to try to, establish independence, semi-independence at least from the Catholic Church, and so that they thought we had to tread softly, not to try to be coercive or push at them to try to establish some sort of dominion of any kind on the part of the spiritual community on behalf of the Catholic Church, or much less the Jesuits. Yeah. So at that point, we just backed up a little bit and left it to. I've had the conversations obviously with Johann X at the Vatican. I've talked with Cardinal Peter Turkson, who was the head of the Pontifical Commission on Social Justice. I've had just a brief meeting with Francis, who was the first Jesuit Pope. But I haven't talked with Leo about it yet, and so I have to. There's just some people who are trying to set up a meeting at Castel Gandolfo to have a meeting with him.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode.
What's interesting is when we talk about ancient symbols, this is your field. And so we've been talking about ancient civilizations for a long time now, and how, in your perspective, they've been visited before. So this has been going on for many, many years. I wanted to hear your perspective of how this story like lands for you in that way.
This is an incredible story. For my first time hearing this full version of it, I only heard like sparsely some information, you know, but the way that you laid it out, I was like watching a movie. I could see the whole thing playing out in my mind. And when you bring up these symbols that were on this craft, it reminds me of another incident that was recorded. I think it might have been Rendlesham Forrest, one of the former military people there, who had talked about he touched the craft, and then he got all this information that he then wrote down and became this code and ended up becoming this coordinates. So, but they also described that there were these symbols on the craft. So it's really aligning with what other people have said about similar encounters. And I do believe that, you know, just like we put markings on our craft, right? We have tail fin numbers on our jets, and our cars have designs and pinstripes. Why wouldn't they? We have the logos of the brand on the vehicle. Maybe there's a more esoteric, maybe they're more spiritual, maybe they're just, you know, branding what brand made this or what company, you know, what galactic company built it. We don't know. But something being on the actual craft, to me, it just makes sense. And it could be symbols that tie back to maybe, you know, it's not authenticated, maybe an ancient culture, like maybe a Sumerian culture or some other type of ancient writing. Maybe these people were somehow teachers of some of the original versions of writing on Earth. And then maybe some of our actual writing styles, specifically maybe cuneiform, could kind of maybe be related to some of these symbols. That's a hypothesis, not a fact, obviously. But it really hits on because we're talking about, again, an advanced form of technology with advanced potential beings engaging mankind, and us being the lesser technological, you know, species. In some way, again, we're mystified, we deify them, we believe that they're maybe demons and all these other things that we kind of do. But I really think that this kind of information is what needs to be on mainstream, you know, and needs to be above all else, because we do need to get an understanding. We do need to have big meetings on these topics. We need to put together a specialized team of people that can address it in a very nice professional manner and bring this information to the world, not by scaring us and telling us it's a threat to national security, by telling us these things are happening, right? And we want to get a better understanding of them, and maybe even recruiting some of the brighter minds of people not in government to come help and work on the basis of deciphering or learning about some of these other potential, I guess, galactic people that might be visiting us.
Yeah, Danny, Billy just mentioned that some individuals may think these are demons, and this reminds me of a few of the congressional hearings and some of the congressional members on podcast. J.D. Vance just recently said that in his opinion, he thinks they're demons, you know, and other people as well. And then, but Tim Burchett would say something like, well, if they haven't invaded us yet and they've been visiting us since antiquity, then obviously they're not malicious. So you are speaking to these whistleblowers. What is their take on this? And what is your take on the fact that who these beings are and why people are going into this fair narrative of demonology?
Well, J.D. Vance's comments, you remember when he made the comment, he mentioned that he hadn't even taken a peek at any of the data whatsoever. He had no information whatsoever on this, but felt that he ought to offer the kind of off the wall. I think actually that they're demonic, you know, and it reminded me very much of Winston Churchill's observation about Neville Chamberlain. He said that Neville Chamberlain is a nice man and he is doing his very best by his own lights, but his lights were none too bright and his best was none too good. And so that this kind of a shoot from the hip kind of interjection on the part of J.D. Vance doesn't require much attention, actually. But there is a group in the military, in the Pentagon. It's a group called the Collins Elite. It's a group of generals, major generals from different branches who believe in these kind of fundamentalist Christian beliefs mostly. I've encountered them. You know, I interviewed an individual who was a member of the Worldwide Church of God, and he was part Project Blue Book. He was actually a clerk typist for Project Blue Book. They used to be typing out the reports where the guys would go and investigate these 700 sightings. and he ended up being taken with his commander of the Project Blue Book to Area 51 and S4, and had actually been brought to a place where they were interviewing one of the live ET beings who was there. They had him in this blue jumpsuit, and he was being very cooperative.
They spoke to the ET.
Well, telepathically, he was communicating, this fellow was afraid of it. They thought he looked demonic and didn't want to go near it. But his superior went in and had this telepathic communication with him. He could see it through this two-way glass that you could see in the room. And what he did is he stayed outside, and they showed him these cards, these index cards, where they were taking notes from interviews with this ET being. And one of the first questions they had asked him, according to the notes, was, "Who are you guys? You know, where do you come from? What are you doing here?" And the being had told him that he was part of this group of individuals from different star systems inside our galaxy. That they've been tasked with going around to the different star systems in our galaxy where life had actually begun, to monitor what the state was of their development.
Yes.
And that's what he was part of. And then they ask a follow-up question. They say, "Well, you say you were kind of tasked with doing this. Who is it that tasked you to do that?" And he said, "Well, you people would consider it God, but it's very, very different than you think." That's what he said. And so this guy said that he didn't believe it. He thought he was lying. So he never told anybody. He'd never told anybody. And he's on his deathbed when he calls me. He calls me to come and be with him up in northern Minnesota. And he's there, you know, with all the tubes in him and everything. He said he felt compelled to tell somebody about this before he died.
Wow.
And he confided that in the, and so that there are, what my sense of it is, and I've talked about this upon occasion. I remember at the old International UFO Congress, when it was still out in lawful Nevada, when I was legal counsel for Dr. John Mack at Harvard. I said, I think that people experience this information through the prism of their worldview, and they have their own particular worldview.
Yeah.
And it turns out that all the studies that we've undertaken about people's worldviews, that they formulate a worldview even unconsciously, predicated upon certain assumptions that they make about four fundamental questions about ultimate reality. Number one is, how did the universe actually come into being? How did this material universe come into being? Why is there this instead of nothing? You know, secondly, you know, where is this all going? Is the universe unfolding in some particular ways? They're going to ultimately dissipate into nothingness by expanding and going through the process of the radioactive decay of each of the elements? You know, or is it when it gets to the point where it's dissolved, every single element in the universe is decayed down into its constituent elements, down into the atoms, and then the atoms are broken down into muons and leptons and quarks, and ultimately an inchoate quantum field. The old inchoate quantum fields is at that spot where they flash back into material manifestation, either as a wave of energy or a particle of mass, and then blink right back out again, and then do it again. And that they've discovered that at the CERN, where they were doing the collider, so they realized that the sequence of which they manifested as a wave of energy or a particle of mass was completely unpredictable. They kept watching it until it was observed.
Exactly.
And as soon as it was observed, and a person had any kind of intent to have it manifest as a wave of energy rather than a particle of mass, it would do so to a statistically significant degree. And that's the one that knocked the Newtonian Cartesian radical materialist worldview into a cockpit back between 1923 and 1927. And the world still hasn't adjusted.
We haven't caught up to it yet.
Adjusted from the old Newtonian Cartesian radical materialist worldview into this quantum worldview of really understanding the relationship between conscious attention and the collapse of the wave function. This is at the core of understanding what's going on. It's at the core, as it turns out, of how the ETs travel. What they actually have a technology, apparently. Now, I've had the conversations with people because, as you know, that I'm the attorney for Lou Elizondo, who headed up the program in the Pentagon on this. I know all the guys. I know Dave Grush. I know Chris Mellon. I know, all of them because I'm legal counsel and we help represent whistleblowers. And the bottom line is there's two things going on right now. Primarily, they're completely freaked out about trying to figure out how these beings of craft transport from their distant star system to here, because they can't believe that they go faster than the speed of light. Well, it turns out that they appear to have a technology by means of which they can functionally bilocate, which is a lot of the prophets and these adepts can't do.
Yeah.
And what they do is through projecting in their mind another location or to where they want to go. What they do is they actually bilocate, bang, bang, like that, and then materialize in this other place. And this is having to do with their consciousness, the capacity for them to conceive of an aspect of reality at a different location. And that they can do this. And the technology they have can gin up this kind of biophysical capacity that they have, as we have, and they can jack it up to the point of being able to transport an entire vehicle with the beings in it. And it's instantaneous. Well, this has completely baffled the military and the intelligence community because they can't figure out how to do it because the heavy left brain training that they have of radical, linear, progressive thought can't get into this. And so what they've been doing is trying to recruit psychics. And pretty soon they're going to realize that there's a relationship between these kind of psychic capacities that human beings had and what we've considered to be spirituality down through the ages. That there's this evolving process going on that Teilhard talks about, where just teleologically and progressively we are evolving into the next stage of our biological evolution as a species. We've come from Australopithecus to Homo erectus to Cro-Magnon to Neanderthal, and here we are, Homo sapiens. And it doesn't dawn on people that we're going to eventually evolve into the next stage of being. And that actually Professor Crane Brinton talked about at Harvard in his final lecture after 50 years of teaching intellectual history at Harvard. In his final lecture, he said he was asked to talk about what the most important intellectual insight was that he had ever encountered in his entire 50 years of teaching at Harvard. And he said, "Oh, this is easy." In this final lecture, I happened to be privileged to be there. And he said, it's easy. He said, "I believe that the greatest minds in our human family realize that we are on the very brink of evolving into the next physical stage of our species, and that the factor that's going to distinguish us from Homo sapien is this faculty, pursuant to which we are going to be able to discern experientially, just like we experience light through sight and sound through hearing. That there's a particular electromagnetic frequency, high frequency, extraordinarily subtle, that bonds every single ultimately irreducible energy of matter, the entire physical universe, into one unified harmonic whole. And by dint of this direct experience, like hearing or seeing, one is able to discern, as he said, to discern what type of conduct, human conduct, either individual or collective, is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of the universe. That was Professor Crane's Brinton at Harvard University. And here's 50 years of students that he's had come from around the world to listen to it. And they're just floored that he's saying something like that, at the sort of, pinnacle of kind of the liberal thought in at least in the United States. And this is something that we know about at the Jesuit headquarters. This is something that is a hidden truth that has been discovered by our human family throughout the ages, and there's been an attempt to communicate this, in more or less goodwill fashion. But the fact is that the Catholic Church had become ossified, at a point like 2,000 years ago, where they were trying to communicate any kind of subtleties about this realm of reality to people, 99.9% of whom were all illiterate at that time, and they never ventured more than 50 miles from where they were born. And so that those who had access to some of this subtle insight were attempting to communicate some of this to the people, but the institutional interests of the church began to prevail. And what they did is they ossified certain kinds of symbols or metaphors that they came up with, and they started to mistake the map for the road. In that they locked onto these things at the Council of Nicaea, in other councils. They codified certain doctrinal demands. One of which is that regular people didn't have access to this experience. This was just the unique possession of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
And that the Buddhists think that it was the Buddha, and others believe that it was Lao Tzu. But the fact of the matter is, these are faculties that our human species has, and that they've been condemned as occult. Okay, and they've been condemned, and that's why they try to refer them as being demonic, or there's some kind of a taboo against going into this area. That's what we're experiencing right now. People who've been brainwashed into locking down on the ancient but outdated ossifications of belief systems need to come up off from this. That's why I think that the Catholic Church has to lead on this. They have to reestablish communications with the Eastern Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox. I've gotten to meet with Kirill, who's the pontiff of the Eastern Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox. I've met with the people that are at the Ukraine. We were on the way to meet with Bartholomew in conjunction with the Vatican. There's a major operation going on here that we have to get the institutions of our culture, not just American institutions, but global institutions, to get updated radically on this, because we're at a terrible stage where the technology of our human species has so vastly outstripped the moral development of our people that we're on the brink of total thermonuclear extinction, self-extinction. To go to a whole next stage. What we want to do is, I say we, I think those of us who are trying to share this information, that we're trying to have all our people lift up together to get past these conflicts and these confrontations with each other, these ideological fights, to ascend to a higher level of consciousness, and then collectively to reach out telepathically to the beings in the galaxy, to make them aware of our availability and our worthiness. That has to be earned. That's the process that we're engaged in. I'm thoroughly impressed with Billy's efforts to communicate this to people.
I appreciate it.
Now, and that like he and I have a similar experience. People, it kind of their initial engagement with this, they go, "Holy shit, these people are really smart." That's what they say to this. But what we got to do is not get attached to impressing people how smart we are. But the fact is that there's detailed spiritual information that people need to understand and rise together for this extraordinary moment of engaging the extraterrestrial civilization and becoming part of it.
I'd love to go deeper into that spiritual information with Billy, because essentially what you were saying there, Danny, around we're in a next evolution of humanity, biological evolution. You've studied the ancient texts, and we've actually been through many ages where humanity has thrived. What have you found of our capabilities as civilizations that have been in golden ages, and what spiritual contexts have you found in there as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and and Mr. Sheehan's really right on point. But mankind is ready for this next evolutionary state. We have had this cycle of rise and fall, right? We've risen and we've fallen. This is the Yuga cycle. And you go into some of this ancient text and really study some of the knowledge and wisdom that they had back then, you discover that they were more advanced than us spiritually at times. They had gone into golden ages where it seems as if technologies were more advanced, but technology seemed to even be blended with spirituality. They had spiritual technology in some cases, telekinesis, psychic abilities, higher levels of intuition. All these things are part of the evolutionary process of mankind. And those skills and talents or gifts, if you want to call them, are standard. What's happened is over time and through the rise and fall of our consciousness, we have forgotten it. Like Graham Hancock says, we're a species with some leisure. And it's not that we don't have the abilities, it's that we have to get tapped back in to unlock them, which requires us to go back and study these ancients so that we can bring awareness to the fact that we did have these abilities before. They took some gentlemen and put them in a laboratory setting with a big bar magnet. And because we have magnetite crystals in our brains, millions of them. You want to see if the magnetite crystals can sense the magnetic field. So they put an EEG tap on her, and they put him in a chair, and they moved that bar magnet around the room. And guess what happened? The magnetite crystals began to orient themselves to the magnetic field, even though he wasn't even aware that it was happening. Yeah. So we're supposed to be able to navigate this earth like turtles and birds and, navigate the magnetic field. Our internal GPS system has been somehow disconnected. It's there, it senses the field, but we consciously are unaware that it's happening. And that's just one small segment of our abilities that we truly have inside of us that we're not tapping into.
Question on that. It's said in the past that the Earth's axis was straight, right? And that when the Earth's axis is straight, technically the seasons should be equal around the planet. And falling into the seasons also could affect the duality, also seasonal depression, our emotional state, right? So when it tilts, the magnetic field is also shifted. So could the Earth's axis be affecting our magnetic field and our alignment in a way that creates more of a dualistic experience? And could it be corrected by maybe the Earth's axis being corrected back to center point?
That's an interesting concept. I mean, when I studied the development of embryos in the embryonic stage, they used tadpoles in space. They were checking to see how these embryos would develop in a zero gravity environment, but also in starlight, gravitational fields.
There you go.
Right?
There it goes. This is the astrological reality.
Right. And they began to realize that the alignments, the gravitational fields, and the aspect of zero gravity or gravity, depending on the Lagrange point, it has a direct effect on the development of the embryo from the embryonic stages. I'm talking about through mitosis and cell development, cell division. And they realized that, wow, wait a minute, these alignments truly do have an effect directly on human consciousness and any living being or any living entity's consciousness or development, at least. And so that at that point, I realized that maybe astrology could be real. Because if you're born in a day with a particular alignment, the Earth's axis is shifted and tilted in a different angle or whatever, right? And we've got all these amazing star alignments, and now you're in the embryonic development stage and your cells are dividing under that particular alignment gravitational field.
That's matrix.
Yes.
That's matrix of the geophysical phenomenon.
Exactly.
And the embryo, absolutely true.
And it's creating all your personality traits. It's developing things about you in ways that you only begin to realize later on, but not realizing it came from those alignments. And that's how these astrologers can actually begin to predict certain things you would do. Real, true astrologers, not the fake ones here, right? And so I began to then believe it's real because the science proves that these alignments have a direct effect on the development and the activities or the actions or the traits of these embryos when they develop into full-size frogs.
Right. And that's why because for so long the people never went more than 50 miles away from where they were born. That what the astrologers ask for is what is the exact longitude and latitude of the location where you were born? Yes. Because that determines what the matrix was of all the different alignments of all the planets and star systems that were affecting you during your gestation. And it's just a fact question as to whether or not it has any particular kind of predictable effect upon you. But the reality is you get with a person who's a genuine, honest astrologer, they will scare you to death. You know, they'll tell you what the kind of mate you pick, the kind of favorite color you got, you know, what kind of career you're in, and you're going, holy shit, I thought this was an act of my own free will.
Right.
And what you begin to realize is that there are these completely unconscious forces that are functioning inside your body, along with your genetic coding from your ancestors. You know, someone says, oh, little Fred, oh, look, he walks just like his grandfather. You know, or the way that she mooks her hair like that, just like how Aunt Lizzie used to be that. You know, there are these other factors they're affecting you all the time. And obviously, of course, the culture you grow up in, and the parents that you had are carrying this genetic programming into you. And while you're functioning unconsciously in response to those stimuli, you are not acting in free will. You are acting as a robot that's been kind of programmed. And that's what consciousness is the secret, the big open secret of our human family, that through meditation, you can ascend into a state of consciousness that transcends that kind of programming.
Absolutely.
And you actually get into a state of unconditioned consciousness from the perspective of which you can make decisions. But one of the final, and this gets to be the real key to this AI conversation, is that you get to a state where you can, in fact, be responsive through this new faculty that's evolving to directly experientially encounter this unitive phenomenon that bonds every ultimate interdisciplinary matter together into a unified harmonic whole. And you can discern what conduct either is harmonious or disharmonious. But the fact of the matter is that because it's a physiological phenomenon, can be matched by an AI. That can be programmed to kick out that signal. The question is, the ultimate question is, which is why I love being with you, you guys, is that human beings potentially have an additional faculty over and above the sixth faculty, and that is the seventh faculty, which by means of which we may be able to directly experientially reach out into the void that surrounds the sum total of all the mass and energy that make up the entire physical universe, out into the infinite and eternal sea of completely undifferentiated consciousness, out of which the material realm evolved. It was enfolded into being. And this is a theological question, that's the realm of the theology. And that is if in fact we have access to that unified, that infinite and eternal field of consciousness, this is the being. But it's not a noun.
Right.
It's not a noun. It's a verb. It's a verb of being. And to nounify this thing with God is one step off always. You're out of phase by one whole octave. You know, this is not a thing. This is not an individual being. This is being itself, unconditioned being. And I've been fortunate to be able to write some articles on this for Open Minds magazine. Is that this is the thing we have in common with the ETs? Is that level of consciousness is how we commune. That is where we are completely the same, no matter how different we are, no matter how many different millions or billions of years they've evolved, and we have it. That one, if we can get to that particular place, there's a common being that we all are.
Right.
And that's the key to consciousness. Conscience is the Latin of which is another way of knowing. That's what conscience means, another way of knowing this ultimate reality. And what our relationship with this is.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%.
Yeah, Danny was talking about the prism through which we view all of these, let's say, phenomena that's going on. And I also wanted to understand, Billy, what has your prism become as you're approaching these subjects with extraterrestrials, with ancient civilizations? And also in that way, you were talking about how a lot of these people in government don't understand how this is happening. When you've done your research, if you could simplify that process for someone that's common, just knowing this information for the first time, what is that process where these ETs are able to, bilocate or go from point A to point B in an instant? What have you found in the quantum
Could I
realm?
just add something to that first, to add to that question? because it's in alignment with it. David Grush also said in the congressional hearing, when they said, what are these beings? He said projections of higher consciousness, right? So that's kind of in alignment with what you're sharing here. So what, like not only by locating, but could you add what that means as a projection of higher consciousness?
Well, let's first start by, I feel that there's several types of beings engaging there. I think we have multidimensional beings from higher dimensions. I think we have ultra-dimensionals, we have interdimensionals. I think we have a variety happening simultaneously. Paranormal activity could be a being obtaining the, a partial sub-frequency or subatomic vibration of our dimension and kind of peering in. If you draw a line on a piece of paper, that's one dimension. Now imagine there were beings living in one dimension, it'd be flat people. If I took my finger and put it on the line, would they perceive my finger? No, they would only perceive a circle. The point at which my finger touched it intersected with their reality, a flat circle.
Yeah.
Right? Not a sphere. And so it's all about our perception of reality, the intersection between higher dimensional beings and their intersection, or even their craft in some cases, into our third dimension will give us these skewed perceptions of reality, thinking we saw one thing that's really a much smaller part of something much larger that we can't perceive because we're immersed in this third dimension. And I think that this ability to go from point A to point B could be done very easily with things like quantum teleportation, for example. They just began to quantum teleport data. This is something new. They took data and they quantum teleported from one place to another. They've been doing particles as well. So now imagine a civilization 1 million years ahead of us being able to quantum teleport themselves, right? Bilocate from one place to another. In other words, they store the location, the rotation, the spin rate, and the vibration of every atom before they are. And they project it to another location and recoalesce or reassemble it there. And in actuality, the first version of themselves has been eradicated and gone. The new version is a facsimile. A very good facsimile, but it's a facsimile, believe it or not. The teleportation is a facsimile. It's not the original thing that teleported, which is why in some of the Star Trek episodes, they have real science. They're scared to teleport in the beginning stages of teleportation because they don't want to be disassembled and die and then reborn again. So every aspect of teleportation is almost like a reincarnation, believe it or not, a controlled reincarnation. And thoughts in the ancient tablet says he had the ability to incarnate at will. Did he have this technology of this bilocation or this quantum entangled or quantum teleportation where he sent himself from one place to the next? He kept saying I could incarnate at will. He said in and on the plane that I desired. It's talking about even in dimensions. Incredible. So these ancients have potentially had this type of knowledge or technology. And this has been going on for so long, and we're just now beginning at the beginning stages of understanding it. And I do believe that, that these beings can move that way, but also through warp drives as well. So a warp drive for a lesser advanced civilization, which is still far more advanced than us. We have the Albuquerque drive under experimentation right now in Mexico. But it takes a warp field, and what a warp field does, it uses an exotic form of energy, antimatter, and it shrinks space in front and expands it from the back. So if I put a tablecloth on this table right here and put one of those glasses in the middle of the tablecloth and then pull the tablecloth, imagine the tablecloth is space. I would pull the glass toward me. Imagine the glass was a spaceship. So if the spaceship actually never moves, the tablecloth will move. So you move space, not the spaceship. Now you can fly multiples the speed of light without violating the theory of relativity. So warp drives are another type of technology that you can utilize to travel very fast in space.
Are we close to rediscovering or remembering this technology?
Oh yeah, they've been testing warp fields out in the Albuquerque drive by scientists. They've been working at for quite some time. They've been working on quantum teleportation, which is going to be another incredible way to transport yourself throughout the universe. I think the most incredible way to do things would be to bilocate, to transmit yourself to another location, bypassing space-time. Now you can stay on the same timeline. Because when you go through chemical rocketry and you're traveling and trying to obtain a potential for speed of light, even with EM drives and things like that, they use microwaves to accelerate, you still now, time is ticking slower as you move faster. And so as you go away from the Earth and travel for a year and then come back, even at a small percent of the speed of light, time is ticking slower for you, but faster for the people on Earth. So you come back to a different timeline, come back to people age and everything else. You can't really make it back within a cycle of, let me come back for Christmas. It doesn't, 20 years could go by.
Yeah.
So you have to create technologies that can get you out and back within a timeline where you can still relate to the people that you left. And that requires these higher wishes.
Yes.
I think we're on the verge of doing.
Okay. So if you have a telescope and the most advanced telescope, you look out into space on the max scale, on the Planck scale, the universe is pixelated. It jumps in frames, right? It's just like a simulation, right? So if that's the case, could light be the rendering speed of the simulation? And if it is the rendering speed, once we jump through warp drives, through collapsing space-time, do we skip the rendering so that we can manifest in a place that can just render as soon as we arrive there?
Yeah, so what's happening is, I was talking about earlier in my talk, how photons, they actually propagate through these pictures. So the light from the light that's shining on me right now, all of us, is not just a photon that's come straight to us. It's re-energizing itself pixel by pixel to get to us. These technologies in bilocation and quantum teleportation and warp drives, well, warp drive is a little bit different. It's moving space, so it's moving the underlying fundamentals of the ether itself. But those other ones that really get you there almost instantly, you are jumping from one pixel and reappearing in a pixel, not even transiting the other ones in between. So you're jumping like a leapfrog, right? Where you're folding space and time, kind of like the Einstein-Rosen bridge, where they talked about Einstein and Rosen talking about, warping space and time to create a portal or a wormhole.
But it's important, I think, to point out that what we're engaged in now collectively are the regular people, are knocking on the door now of trying to get at some of this information that the national security state here in the United States has captured, and that they're attempting to reverse engineer to use as a platform for nuclear weapons delivery systems. It's the old famous Sufi saying that when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. And so that these people in the military, I mean, who are good souls, I mean, the people that I've met are really decent people, but they've been brought up in an entire culture that has affirmed they're having a certain perspective on things, and they genuinely experience these things. As soon as they see UFO, they don't go, holy mackerel, an extraterrestrial civilization, all kinds of fantastic opportunities for our human family. They go, wow, what a weapon system that today, and that's
Dollar sign.
that's their instantaneous reaction to it. And and I talk with these guys, and they actually genuinely perceive this as a threat because they're not in control of it, and it can quote invade their airspace, without their permission. And that they have this terrible fear of losing control of this, and that's the state they're in right now. And that there are differing people who have differing desires to try to let some of this information out, but there's a deep group that are here that are going to hold on to this. They're never going to do this voluntarily. They're never going to let go of this voluntarily. But we have a secret, and that is the regular people know that we can communicate directly with the extraterrestrials. We can actually communicate with them, facilitate them coming to particular places to meet with us. And what we've got to do is step through and not try to go through the national security state. We're trying to get them to release information because a lot of people won't believe it until they actually are told by people in positions of authority. That is, people from the national security state, including the president. But the reality is, there are those of us who already know. We could reach out and communicate with the extraterrestrial people, establish citizen diplomacy, citizen to citizen diplomacy, and demonstrate to them our availability, to demonstrate to them our worthiness, to have higher consciousness, to be able to participate with them in a collegial and a collaborative way, and that we've got to open this pathway up. I mean, this is how we did it actually with Mikhail Gorbachev from Jesuit headquarters. We were actually in direct communication with Gorbachev when he was still Secretary of Agriculture, to get him to agree to join with the United States to disassemble the nuclear warheads, and to destroy them. We got him to agree to do that. But he said to my assistant, who was in charge of the nuclear disarmament, he said, but he said, the United States will never let go of those. They'll never agree to initiate the process. So I'll have to do it, he said. But he told Dr. Jim Garris, my dear friend from Harvard, Divinity School. We did our master's work, and he was on my staff at Jesuit Hickory. And Gorbachev said the U.S. will never do that. He says, because they believe they have to have the nuclear weapons,
Right.
not protection against us. China.
There was word about China.
I said, China. China's demonstrated to the United States and Korea at Incheon that they can put 1 billion men in uniform and give them traditional weapons and just overwhelm you. And so the United States and the Western powers are terrified that they can't have a traditional war with China. But nuclear weapons, that's why they're holding on to them. But this was exactly what President Kennedy was getting set to reveal. President Kennedy on June 5th of 1963, shortly before he was killed, had these communications going with Khrushchev following the October missile crisis they had in October of 1962. And that they were so freaked out by this, both Kennedy and Khrushchev, they were exchanging these letters. They exchanged 18 separate secret letters back and forth. The Norman cousins were delivering these letters back and forth. And what Kennedy and Khrushchev decided what they were going to do, they were each going to exercise their respective executive authority to start to disassemble the actual nuclear warheads in the arsenals and have them destroyed. And they were going to engage in this mutual process. But to replace the economic stimulus of the whole nuclear war industry in the respective countries, they were going to replace it with a joint space program. And they were going to go into space together, completely collaboratively, right? And so John Kennedy decided on June 5th of 1963 that he would ask John McConnell, who was the new CIA director, to give him all the information about the UFO stuff. And they realized, wait a second, he's getting set to give it to Khrushchev. And that isn't what got him killed. What got him killed is when they realized that he was having these conversations with Khrushchev, they dug in and found out that they had decided they were going to disassemble the nuclear warheads. That's what got it killed. That's when McCone told Bissell, Richard Bissell, who was in operations in the agency, that he contacted Alan Dulles, who was the former CIA director, who was at the same time the chief counsel for the Brown Brothers Harif, this place where the China lobby resided. That these are wealthy families. You said the 100 families, but like 23 families. Actually, we're members of this Brown Brothers Harif private investment group, the CEO for which was George Herbert Walker.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And his son Prescott Bush were there, and that's how this happened historically. There's a whole history behind this. Then we need disclosure not only of the realities about UFOs, but we need disclosure on the part of the Catholic Church and the other religious divisions about the actual capacities of our human species, pursuant to which we have direct unitive communion with the infinite and eternal. Doesn't have to be conduited through the church. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to them for a confession. That there's all kinds of disclosure that has to be undertaken here. But the disclosure of the past sins, if you will, of our human family, we have to own those. We have to transcend those. We have to seek forgiveness among ourselves for each other. And once we do this, we can become worthy. We can be trusted by the extraterrestrials. They don't want us out there with thermonuclear weapons. They don't want us transporting nuclear weapons. We're going to get embargoed. So
Yeah, but sort of we're gonna grow up.
yeah, we got to grow up. We got to grow up and show them that we can transcend this. And the pathway is through consciousness, and the secret is out. That's why all these little statues you see of individual human beings sitting there meditating in every tradition. There they are. Oh, there's another. What is it? What's the story here? What do they try to communicate to it? There's a secret that we know. That's a secret technology by means of which we can elevate our consciousness, and then we can transcend this patterning, this kind of programming that we've got in astrological programming, genetic programming, cultural programming. All of this can be transcended, or we can ascend into the state of light conditioned consciousness by means of which we can communicate directly with the extraterrestrial beings and open up our entire future into our next iteration of our own evolution. That's what the conversation is about here this weekend. That's what the consciousness discussions are about right now, and this is what we have to facilitate. Right? I'm proud and privileged to be able to be a small part of it with you, as you all are.
Yeah, us too. Now, getting back to disclosure and the mainstream narrative of disclosure, I woke up in 2001, so I've been following the disclosure ever since then. And I saw in the beginning, around that time, a lot of people were into government disclosure. Like they really believe, like, the government's going to disclose something. And for a long time, there was all these dates and predictions from people in the community. And then 2012 happened. People thought there was going to be some big event. That big event didn't happen on the level that they expected. And then people went from waiting for something in the future to becoming more present. I felt it was more about like, let's find the beauty in the moment rather than wait for something. But in that process, we also saw a distrust of government completely erode in the last 20 years, right? Ever since 9/11, pretty much, completely erode. And now we have all these whistleblowers coming out with some deep truths, congressional hearings, but people 20 years ago who were waiting for the government to disclose are so jaded from government that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? And so it's like there's the discernment meter has gone off. People just don't trust anymore, which in some level is good, but in some level we're not able to give attention to things that are happening and even to acknowledge the wins. Right. And since you are in communicating with these individuals that people are judging left, right, and center, right? Especially Lou Elizondo and others. What's your take on that? What message would you have for those individuals so that we don't see everybody as a part of some cabal? But
So
yeah,
we just had a major discussion 2 days ago, just before I came up. Our New Paradigm Institute, that is the base of our operations there in the Romero Institute, has Citizens for Disclosure. We have teams in 43 of the states right now that are engaged in pushing for disclosure, right? And we're going to be flesh out all 50 states. We're going to go into all 435 congressional districts. And one of the things when on February 19th, when Trump said, "Oh, I'm going to contact the Secretary of War and the others to tell them to start gathering together this information for public release," right? So we organized our people to say, "Here, we want you all to reach out to the White House and insist that Trump keep his promise." Well, and they were going, "Excuse me? What? I mean, I'm not going to waste my time trying to get President Trump to do something honest because he's not an honest man, you know?" And so we said, "But look at what we've got to do is we understand that. But what we've got to do is exhaust every administrative remedy that we have. We have to confront him with his promise, to try to whatever pressure we can on him, but we have to go to the Congress. Congress is the constitutional body that we've elected to go to represent us. And if they're not doing what we want, we're going to replace them." Okay, so what we've done is we've started distributing these pledge cards now to every single one of the candidates in all 435 congressional districts and all of the 35 states where they're having elections in 2028 for the presidency, and for their a third of the Senate, and they have to sign these pledge cards. You're pledged that if you are elected, you're going to support full disclosure of all of these government secrets, including not only the Epstein files, but the UFO files, that you're going to do this. And if you won't sign the pledge card, we're going to tell everybody. We're a 501c3. We're not taking any position on any particular election because we're not allowed to. But we're going to tell everybody that you won't sign the pledge card to be transparent, to reveal these things. We're not talking about you revealing how you build an atomic bomb or anything, or everybody's social security number. What we're saying is there are some absolutely essential pieces of information that people in a polity, in a democratic polity, need to know in order to make informed moral judgments.
What else other than the UFO files?
Well, clearly the Epstein files, those are absolutely essential. Also the history of the Central Intelligence Agency overthrowing democratically elected governments. They got a little pinprick of it in the Church Committee, chaired by Senator Frank Church of Idaho. Senator Church, the very next election 2 years later, was completely unseated because the secret government pumped millions of dollars into his campaign against it up in Idaho, to show that he supported the Equal Rights Amendment, and that he supported some control over automatic weapons. And so they ran him out of office. They did the same thing to Dick Clark in Iowa, who opposed their covert operations in Africa. They did the same thing to Birch Bayh in Indiana, right? Okay, so this secret government that is functioning in the national security state is a threat to the constitutional fabric of our country. It's not just Donald Trump. There's this entire national security state that since, September of 1947 has been in operation. We have to deconstruct that national security state. We absolutely have to do that. So we have to have genuine disclosure about what all those activities have been. So those are some of them. We have to have full disclosure about 9/11. I mean, anybody with, a mechanical IQ above room temperature realize Building 7 doesn't collapse into its footprint, because, a piece of metal hit one of the windows. I mean, and to keep people in that kind of state of ignorance and insist that they do whatever you tell them to do, that you were talking about before. The people have to develop our own sense of being able to think clearly. People can do that now. As you well know, down over 50 years that I've been practicing law, I've been spending my time trying to disclose these kind of things. As we disclosed the Pentagon Papers. I was the book counsel of the New York Times, or in the Pentagon Papers. We did the Karen Sopel case that revealed the fact that nuclear power plants were contaminating people. We did 3 Mile Island, and we stopped them from pumping all the radioactive effluents into the Susquehanna River. We did the Big Iran-Contra cases that, they're defying Congress and smuggling weapons to the Congress and massive amounts of cocaine, poisoning our people here in the country. We've done all that. So we participated in helping to undermine blind faith in the government proclamations, okay? But so we are, I think, somewhat well situated to be able to communicate to our people, okay, look, we've got you convinced that you don't just blindly believe what they're going to say. But we have to try to use the constitutional structures that we have to reassemble a new paradigm. That's why we're the New Paradigm Institute. That's what we're doing. What are the kind of amendments that we're going to have to make now that we know what's going on here? Okay, that's what we need to do. And we're setting forth those changes that need to be made in the political structure, in the geopolitical treaties that we have, the structure of the nation states, the psychological beliefs that people have been talked into doing, the religious institutions. There's some work that we've got to do here in order to qualify to be worthy citizens of the galaxy. And
About reprogramming us now.
that's right. We've got to get people to think for ourselves. That they've got to stop wasting their time talking to their television, to change channels so they can watch one of the 500 movies that are available for them. They've got to stop spending all their time going to these $100,000 football stadiums. Instead of paying attention, you can do some time on that. You can enjoy yourself. We're not asking you to become a monk here. But the bottom line is you got to pay attention. You got to become good citizens, okay? And you got to become worthy citizens, and you got to assert yourself. And we've got to move our constitutional order into the next phase of our biological evolution. And that's what we need to do. There may need to be some changes. We may have to deal with the direct election of the president, to deal with the electoral college.
Electoral college has to be done.
Then we had to deal with the Federal Reserve. We got to deal with the economic system. But we know what those things are. We've been spending 50 years doing the analysis of these things. So we know what kind of options we have available that are practical and workable. So this is what the New Paradigm Institute is doing. And that's why Billy and I and others are out on the hustings, sharing information with people so that people go, wow, yeah, there's a whole bunch of information that we didn't know about.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to share it. And people are coming awake. They're coming alive. And, you're going to be developing this for 2,000 people who come together, 10,000 people that come together.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to work in collegial relationships with Contact in the Desert, other major gatherings, that so we can all share information. We're not competing with each other. This is all plus, an operation that we're doing. And eventually, we're going to dissolve away the resistance of these adherents to the national security state. But we had to deal with their worldview. They have a fixation that our universe is expanding and decaying and going to be dissolving into nothing, no thingness. That's their cosmological perception. And so they say, what the hell? Why should we not, move to engage in our immediate self-gratification, our own self-interest? I sat there and talked to one of these full guys who's on the UFO task force, a high-ranking military official, and he said, well, look at it. There's some third world country that's got some element or product that we really need. Well, we should just go get it. If they won't do it voluntarily, we should just go get it militarily. Because if we don't do it, China will do it. He said, or Russia will do it. I said, that's aggressive war. That's a complete violation of the whole just war theory. Like, oh, blah blah blah, it's just a bunch of words. They've been trained to believe these things. So what we have to do is, in kindness of our hearts, is to share the other vision with them. We've got to get more data from the ETs. About what's the story here on this dynamic with our universe. What have you guys figured out about this? Okay, and what have you figured out about the nature of consciousness? This whole ontological question that people have to resolve. What is the relationship between our consciousness and the actual physiological evolution of our species? What kind of a role do we play in consciously dealing at the quantum level with the acceleration of our biological evolution? What are these things all about? People say, well, regular people can't have those conversations. Sure they can. Sure they can. Because if you understand it, you can talk about it in ways that people can hear it. Just like talking to any jury. I remember doing a trial for ACLU up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, for The Last Tango in Paris, for United Artists. It's Marlon Brando's movie. Bernard Bertolucci did this movie called The Last Tango in Paris, and it has some sexually explicit scenes in it. And it turns out when it arrived at Idaho Falls, Idaho, the local district attorney sent 3 uniformed police officers to the ticket booth in the little theater with Polaroid cameras to take photographs of every person who bought a ticket, and they had to show them their ID, show them that they were 21 years old. And we went in there for ACLU and challenged them doing that. And so they decided they were going to prosecute the theater owner for pornography. And so I ended up going to, and he said, that the trial's going to start next Monday. Wait a second, we just got here. We said, no, we're going to have the trial. So we went in front of a jury, total members of which were members of the Mormon Church.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and the judge turned out to be the president of the Mormon state, Judge Thompson. Okay, and we were able to communicate with that jury to get them to understand the value of free speech.
Wow.
And freedom of thought and stuff, and communicate to them. And all of a sudden, they realized that they were in a movie. It did the thing like, wait, this is like a movie.
Yeah.
Truman Show. And that's what's happening right now. We're in the movie, the future fiction movie of the arrival of an extraterrestrial civilization.
Yes. Wow.
Okay, get people to understand. You're in the movie now. This is the real deal. So what would you do? You would do what the heroes do in the movies. So you try to hold back the military, them from shooting the ETs. Just like in the day of the Earth stood still. That you're the heroes of this story.
Yeah.
Okay, we are the heroes of our own story, and we have to reach out and qualify to be worthy citizens within this galaxy.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. It's a fantastic opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity. We're all glad of this incarnation. Yeah, we have to be here at this time.
Speaking of this fantastic opportunity to be with you 3 men, it's been an honor. And also, I wanted to wind down the conversation, really going back to this quote that I found from Danny, just for us to reflect on it for a bit. You've said, we must move from secrecy and control to openness and stewardship. The paradigm shift begins not in government offices, but in the human heart. And so just for final reflections from you 3, I'd love to hear what is the impact that for you as men, being in your heart has had on this journey of spiritual awakening and understanding all these truths from a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been an amazing journey. I started this journey in 1977. It's been a long time. This just journey, seeing a UFO to now being a person talking about them and trying to help disclose the information that they're real and that they're not here to unalive us, that they're waiting for us to grow up. And the biggest lesson that I've been able to discern from all of this is that mankind is we're like babies learning how to crawl. But we need to learn how to stand up and walk. And they're waiting for us to stand up and learn how to walk. We will get to the edge of the table, and we're so close to that transformation process. We're going to pull ourselves up and begin to take that first step. We're this close to that transformation that we're talking about. But when we take that step, what happens to the baby? So the person's second step, they usually fall. They cry. It's like, oh, we were on our way, and then what happened? But the baby gets courage to get up again. It walks a few more steps, it falls again. But the second time it was, and it is not that bad. It gets up again. Before you know it, the baby's walk. What is the definition of walking? Learning not to control your fall. And when mankind learns how to control his fall, that's when I feel in my heart we'll be ready to have a seat at the table. We have to spiritually grow and develop that to the point where we are collectively walking, learning how to control our fall, and that's when we're going to rise as a species on this planet. And I think that what we do on this planet has a direct effect on everything going on within the universe. It's then butterfly effects. What we do here is going to resonate through and vibrate through even dimensions. So I think that there are multiple realities and multiple dimensions, even multiple beings in different dimensions on realities waiting for us to grow up. We're close, and we will do it. The ultimate goal, I believe, for us is, can we get to a golden age and sustain? I've seen the rise and fall over and over. We've risen and fall. Kingdoms rise and everything. There's nowhere written that it has to happen. It just happens. Can we be a civilization that can get to a golden age and sustain it? Maybe that's the ultimate goal. Maybe that's the point experiment.
I agree with that so much. When I first got into this, it was through the Sumerian scriptures, but in there I started seeing symbolism of like things that look like quantum physics, right? Wormholes, travel, and then immediately went from ancient history to the quantum reality. And so through my mind, I intellectualized, oh, is that what the ancients in the East were talking about? Is that what my family was talking about from Hinduism? Is yoga, vibration, quantum physics? Is chanting an acoustic organic version of quantum physics? And so from appeasing the linear mind, I eventually said, well, that means there's something else beyond this reality, and that herein lies the connection between science and religion, vibration. And the Eastern world had that. Even Yeshua spoke about it because he had a lot of Buddhist connections as well, and it dissipated. So from just that linear aspect, I went to my heart. I know a lot of people in this world work with a lot of speakers that went from the heart then to the mind, right? I went the other way. And it took a long time to get to my heart, but now I realize that humans in general, we all want the same things, right? We want, let's say, love, connection, community, right? And when we don't have those, but you might say, oh, that guy doesn't want that. Look at the way he's treating that person. Guess why? It comes from a lack of those things, right? And then, I watched this interview a few years ago, a whistleblower, a CIA whistleblower, and she said, you got to realize everybody thinks they're the good guy. The military people you work with that are protecting us think they're the good person. The terrorists think they're the good person. Why? Because everyone thinks they have something to protect and that the other is going to take away what they need to protect, right? And so if we realize that we all want the same things and have so much more in common, and these people that claim to be in control keep telling us that, oh, that country is going to take your freedoms away from you, right? And we shift out of that and realize that we're one human family, that's really where for me, the liberation lies.
Yeah. As there is, Emilio mentioned the famous butterfly effect. That the point being, it's, people would know what is a butterfly flapping their wings at the middle of the jungle in South America. She set up a pattern, a wave that'll go all across the world and can actually affect the entire world, right? And generate a great storm and at sea. And that I remember that just after Lou Elizondo and I were going to meet with the Inspector General of the United States Defense Department and his staff, and to talk to them about the complaint that Lou and I had drafted, that filed that about the retaliation was being taken against him for revealing the videos, right, the big Tic Tac videos. And we were coming up at the Inspector General's building right next to the Pentagon, and we went to have a lunch at this little restaurant. There was a friend of Lou's, and the staff of his from ATIP were there. So not them, right? And so we were sitting there in this restaurant. Nobody else was in the restaurant. And one of the guys was upset, saying, "Why in the world is it the ETs?" He said, "Why don't they just come down here? They come down and just land and talk to people." And I said, "Well, I should tell you the butterfly story. And it's about this little boy that loved butterflies, and he knew about the butterfly effect and how important they were. He was collecting butterflies. He had this big gossamer net out in his backyard. There's butterflies they around inside, right? And he wanted to get a specimen of a monarch butterfly. And he looked all around. He found this perfect cocoon on a monarch butterfly. And he brought it back home, and we put it in this little box with cotton in it, put lights on it, and kept it nice and warm, right? And he watched it kind of going through this metamorphosis and growing and growing. Finally, it got to the point where the butterfly he farmed was struggling to break out of the cocoon, was struggling, flapping its wings against the silken threads were breaking. Got down to the point where there was one last silken thread that was holding the butterfly, and he was flapping his wings, and the little boy watched it and started feeling terribly sympathetic for this butterfly, and say, "Oh, look at him struggling." Said, he went and got a little pair of scissors. He snipped the last silken thread, and the butterfly came free, and was an absolutely perfect specimen of monarch butterfly, except that it could never fly, because it turns out that it had to struggle against that last silken thread in order to build it, pull muscle strength and enable.
Wow.
And this is why we have to struggle ourselves against these last silken threads that we've woven around ourselves of nuclear weapons, of fear of scarcity, competition. These last silken threads that we've woven around ourselves, we have to break free in order to develop the kind of moral muscle structure that we need to have to be able to fly. And to be able to venture out into space and become members of this galactic civilizations. That's the additional butterfly effect.
Wow.
Love that.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.